expects no less. The crimes warrant such a result. And your circumstances, personal circumstances, are not sufficiently compelling to come to any different conclusions. In the result, on count 1, the murder of Henri Van Breda, you are sentenced to life imprisonment. On count 2, the murder of Martin Van Breda, you are sentenced to life imprisonment. On count 3, the murder of Teresa Van Breda, you are sentenced to life imprisonment. For the attempted murder of Marley Van Breda, you are sentenced to 15 years imprisonment.
Well, 3 life sentences for axe-murderer Henri Van Breda. It's a case that grabbed headlines across our country. To help us understand the psychological science behind such killers is Dr. Sats Cooper. He joins us on the desk now. He's the head of the International Psychological Union in the country. Good afternoon, Doctor, and thank you for your time on the SABC News Desk.
My pleasure.
Well, you just saw the sentencing being handed down. It's a case that riveted the nation. Help us understand what motivates a killing spree of this nature and the brutality attached as well.
Well, look, the particular facts in this case are simply not available. And that's probably why there's so much speculation around it. And I think the judge, in his very terse judgment, said as much. So there's no reason why this should have happened. We don't understand any of the background to this. So there's only speculation, and that speculation is by private investigators and others.
But what would be some of the key drivers when it comes to behavior like this?
I think that there's something that would have snapped in the individual to cause this. He, at the time of the murders or killings, was a 20-year-old young man. We don't know if drugs and alcohol played a role in this. We don't know what the issues were between himself and his family, because each of the family members was injured, save himself. So a lot of circumstantial evidence, which clearly there was the bogeyman, like the Oscar Pistorius case, but the facts are there, and we saw chillingly this man hearing the sentence and not an emotion, not a flicker of emotion at all on this matter.
I must say, throughout the trial, he's been very stoic, a lack of emotion. Is it normal for somebody in this kind of situation?
Well, I think there's a certain benumbed feature that characterizes him. I was actually in court a couple of months ago and noticed that. Deadpan, no expression whatsoever. So the ability to actually explain and then show remorse if indeed the court has found, so we can't say anything else about it, he is a murderer, is inexplicable. Really inexplicable. We don't know all the facts, and shockingly, he comes from a very well-to-do family. Yes. So we don't know what the issues were that propelled him to do the dastardly acts that he's convicted of.
What would, I'm not saying it happened in this particular case because we don't know that, but how would narcotics use or alcohol usage perhaps contribute to violent behavior in this context, Doctor?
Well, you know, if you are that age, you're a young person, you're not an adult yet, really, and you're spoilt by your material background. He was sent off to Australia to do a degree, which he clearly didn't complete. Back home, there must have been issues between them. He was unable to mediate the problems he had, and there's stories that he was involved with drugs. So if those are true, then they would have played a serious role in creating a break between the reality and his perception and his cognition. Because drug taking and alcohol use even for the best amongst us, changes our perception and behavior.
It becomes difficult to overlook, Doctor, that both in this case and in the Oscar Pistorius case, we saw both men use in the defense saying that they were threatened by a perceived intruder. But just this week in Ennerdale, an Ennerdale father shot dead his child at the window of his car, thinking that it was a criminal. Why is this kind of fear proving so fatal? Where does it come from? And what is this irrational fear that has sunk so deeply in the South African public psyche?
Well, look, this is a violent society. It's been violent for decades. The violence has been there for at least 7 decades. It's gone up and down depending on what the issues are. The unprecedented nature of violent incidents shown by the police statistics that get reported on show that our country is one of the most violent societies on earth. Without being at war, we are perhaps the most violent society. All the indices for homicide, for stabbings, for assault, for femicide, for infanticide, for road carnage, you name it. The high anxiety levels, the kinds of outbursts that we get, the racial stereotyping, the reversion to old thinking, all of it is there. We are actually a society that's in a low grade civil conflict with ourselves. And in that situation, nobody is the winner. So we will implode on ourselves. We turn on those often who are the closest to us and who look to us for protection or some comfort. And the violence just perpetuates itself. So the only way we're going to change this, if we look at the root cause, and the root causes lie in the huge disparities that exist in our society, the huge numbers of young people, particularly African youth, who are just surplus people out there. They finish matric, that you can get nothing with, you can do nothing with, go on to do degrees. Often those degrees are almost useless as well, and there's no work for you. So we're sitting on a powder keg here, and we're not thinking of new ways to engage. We live in a digital age, and we're not engaging that factor. So the politicians will promise jobs, and they're not going to get created. The world over, jobs are decreasing.
Thank you, Dr. Sats Cooper, head of the International Psychological Union, joining on the SABC News Desk. Thank you for sharing your insights with us this afternoon. Time to take a short break. More news after this.